Hi, Jennifer Christensen here. It's a KAEA mentor chair. So I am in my kiln room, okay? And what I'd like to do today is just kind of show you a little bit about the kiln that I have and how to program it, and then a very short, brief tutorial on how to load it. Okay, so thanks for joining us. So let's start with my kiln. I have a Scott automatic kiln, which means it's got that awesome computer that has some preset programs in it and that you can actually program to do what you want it to do for like glass or if you need to preheat. So we're going to start with the anatomy of the kiln. And inside here, we'll talk about this. This is the fire brick. Okay, that's what this yellow stuff is. And here we have the coils or the elements. I had talked with a friend of mine, Natalie Brown. She teaches high school ceramics, and she wanted to be very clear that not only do these get super hot, they are actually electrified. So you do not want to touch them when the kiln is on, because there is about, how much voltage goes through this bad boy. I think it's 220. And you'll electrocute yourself and have a really bad day. So don't touch the elements, okay? Common sense, but the disclaimer is there. Okay, if we're coming over here, that is my thermocoupler. So basically it tells the temperature of my kiln to the computer. Okay, and at the bottom I have a base layer of my kiln shelves. Okay, you can see some shelf supports there and some really wet clay waiting to hang out and dry out. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so let's go back to the outside. And we have ventilation holes for the fumes that the chemicals that come off the pieces when it gets fired. Natalie tells me that you really want these open in the first half of the firing and then close at the end of the firing so it keeps its heat longer. She said, generally speaking, most people leave this one open. So that's what those are for, in case you're wondering. I wasn't really sure myself, actually, until I talked to Natalie. But down here is our awesome computer. I love this computer. Okay, first you have your presets, okay? So you can click cone fire, tell it what firing, that'd be 04, and that's what I use for my glaze. And then you can have fast, medium, and slow. Okay, so you can hit fast and tell it enter. Speed, fast, hold, stop, and it's ready to go. All you have to do is push start. Now what I like is the fact that you can also program individual users, so this is user 1, to modify your firing schedule. I got a firing schedule which is just a list of times and ramping times from the manual of this kiln, but what I wanted it to program to do was to preheat. So I have 5 segments, and the first segment is my preheat segment. Now all the preheat does is sets the kiln at about 50 degrees per hour, which I don't know if that's slow or not, but I'm going to adjust it later, to about 200 degrees. Now what that does is it dries out all of my clay, if it was leather hard, so that it gets to bone dry before it ramps up the firing and goes to bisque. So I've been doing this all year because we've got 9 weeks in my class and I don't have time to let my clay sit. So I've yet to have anything explode. I did used to use 250 for my preheat temperature, but after talking with Natalie, she suggested 200 degrees simply because water boils at 212. So going down 50 degrees kind of makes it less likely for your water in your clay to expand and explode on you. Okay, but basically what the firing schedule does is it tells, oh, and I hold for 12 hours. That's just what I do. The ramping schedule tells you how much per hour it's going to ramp up and to what temperature. So this one's going to ramp up at 250 per hour to 1,000 degrees, and then it just goes through these steps, okay? And this is the firing schedule for this one. This one goes to 1,300, and then it goes all the way up to the temperature that it needs to get to 05. Okay, and at this point I do want to make it clear that I am talking 05. I do low fire clay in this room, so make sure that that 0 is in front of your stuff, okay? And once I've got it all programmed, you just hit the go button and it'll fire all by itself. So I want to talk about some kiln accessories and how to load a kiln. The first thing I want to point out are shelf supports, okay, and they come in different sizes and shapes. So these are mine, they're all different sizes, and some kiln stilts. Okay, these little bad boys are awesome when your kids don't follow directions or you need something completely glazed. So the glaze piece sits on that, and as long as your glaze doesn't puddle, it will pop right off of those little spikes. Okay, save your kiln shelf. Speaking of kiln shelves, if you don't know what this stuff is, you might want to investigate it. This is kiln wash, okay? And you apply this to your kiln shelves to protect it from glazing. So if you look at my shelves right here, that's an unglazed, an unwashed side, and there's the wash side. Okay, so it puts a protective coating that the glaze is less likely to stick. Okay, now when you are loading your kiln, the first thing you want to take into account is the size of your shelf supports. So we're going to go over here and look at my pieces that I need to load in the shelf. And yes, you'll notice they're mostly leather hard, but I like to kind of eyeball my stilts, and for the most part, everything's going to work underneath that stilt. So when I go to load my kiln, I put my stilts down first. Not my stilts, my shelf supports. Okay, so you can see from this shelf, I have them in 3 places. Okay, and it is the same size that I just showed you on one side. On this side, I need a different size because you don't necessarily, you want airflow in your kiln. So for the shelf next to it, I will be either going bigger or smaller depending on what pieces I have. So these are the pieces that I got in there, and I'm going to set you down for just a second. Okay, and we're going to pretend that these pieces are totally ready and I can put them in the kiln. Now, what I do, in case you didn't know, if this is a bisque fire, so your pieces can actually touch. They will not seal together. If this was a glaze fire, that would not be true. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You can have pieces touch on a glaze fire, just not on, no, you can't have them touch on a glaze fire. Sorry, I'm not sure why I said it that way. Okay, so what I'm trying to do, set up my camera here. Ooh, perfect. Okay, so you can see that I've got my stilts here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the next shelf. Now, normally I would not do this until I had the other half of my base filled up, but I'm going to just show you for demonstration purposes. Okay, so I'm going to very carefully put my shelf down. Okay, and it sits just like that. All right, now I'm ready for the next set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my shelf supports. I want all the same size. Okay. And you basically put them in the exact same spot that your first set were in. This is how I was taught to load a kiln. Okay, and now I can put all my pieces on there, and when they're all full, then you put in your next shelf. I hope this is helpful. Thanks.